Story 1. If you are autistic, you are either a genius or essentially a child. I dislike what media portrayals have done to the understanding of autism. Story 2. The appeal to nature drives me nuts. It is often used as a basis for esoteric nonsense, including essential oils, homeopathy, and anti-vaccination views. Story 3. Being nervous can cause asthma attacks. Typical television scenario. Socially awkward person panics about something silly and reaches for their inhaler. Reliever inhalers make your heart beat faster, which is the last thing you need when you are already panicking. Asthma attacks are caused by things such as allergies, dust, perfume, and smoke, not uncomfortable social situations. Story 4. The belief that humans only use 10% of their brains and that goldfish have poor memory is incorrect. Story 5. The idea that someone who is angry or upset must automatically be wrong is incorrect. Story 6. That I am single because I am a loser or a coward is not true. I am single because I am a greedy, selfish person who does not want to devote much time or money to others. Story 7. Educated means intelligent. It definitely does not. I know a lot of educated idiots and many very intelligent dropouts. Story 8. Not all bisexual individuals want a threesome or will be unfaithful in relationships. Story 9. Grenades do not explode into giant fireballs. There is a quick puff of black smoke. That is it. Story 10. One common misconception I find frustrating is that intelligence is solely determined by academic success. Many people assume that if someone is not excelling in school, they are not smart, when in reality intelligence can manifest in various ways such as creativity, emotional understanding, practical skills, and more. Everyone has unique strengths that are not always captured by traditional measures. Story 11. MRI technologist here. Metal is not the only unsafe thing for MRI. I do not care what your doctor told you about any device implanted in your body. Quite frankly, they are not the expert when it comes to MRI safety. We are. Additionally, every company has different policies. If I am asking you to do something, it is for a reason. Whether it is removing your jewelry, changing your clothes, or answering the same questions you have already been asked on the phone and by my technical assistant, it is for your safety. I am operating a very dangerous machine that can definitely kill you, and I am responsible for your safety. Story 12. The belief that bisexual people are promiscuous is a misconception. We do not want to have intimate relationships with everyone, just some people from each gender group. Story 13. That extroverts are happy people and that introverts have a poor personality. Story 14. The most unpleasant doctors with the poorest bedside manner are brilliant. Story 15. At Waterloo Napoleon did surrender. No, he did not. He surrendered later at Rochefort after fleeing from Waterloo. Story 16. The misconception that if you are black, you are automatically from the inner city. Story 17. People with mental illness are not insane or unnaturally incoherent. Many people coexist with mental illness very mundanely, and much of their mental illness stems from stress and a lack of effective coping skills. This is not the case for everyone, but they are usually very clear-headed. Their thoughts are filtered through their own pain, which can sometimes sound like being insane. Medication helps to alleviate the pain and enables them to cope more responsibly. Even if someone may be truly insane, they still deserve a minimum level of respect and the dignity to demonstrate their ability to function. Instead of shutting them down, their voices should be uplifted regardless of sanity, and they should receive support to properly express their perspectives. Story 18. I am not shy. I just do not have much to say if I am still trying to get a read on you or if all you want to talk about is the weather when I can already clearly see that it is, in fact, raining. Wanting to listen instead of finding any opportunity to speak is not a mental disorder. Thank you and goodbye. Story 19. Australian wildlife is all trying to kill you compared to Americans. You have actual large predators like bears and wolves. The most we have are a few dangerous ocean animals, just don't go in the ocean, and snakes. Avoid them in summer. You can get antivenom for a spider bite, but you can't put your face back together. Story 20. The main point of Romeo and Juliet is the love story. The true purpose of Romeo and Juliet is to end the cycle of violence. Story 21. Socializing is something introverts dislike. Unlike extroverts who seem to recharge from being among others, introverts merely need a day to recover from a night out. It seems like their phone's battery needs some time to recharge completely. Story 22. That chewing gum takes years to digest is a myth. Most of it is indigestible and does not get digested at all. It simply passes through the digestive system, and any remaining components are absorbed. Story 23. People tend to group all Palestinians as Muslims. Story 24. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that request. Story 25. Workers strike because of terrible working conditions or pay that has not kept up with the cost of inflation. Typically, a strike occurs only after extensive negotiation, as workers do not want to strike at all. Story 26. Certain kinds of women cannot be victims of abuse. Not all of us are meek, staring at the floor, and lacking self-confidence. This is often used as an excuse not to believe women who are being hurt. Not all of us pretended he would change and stayed in hope of that. Some of us were held hostage with viable threats after trying to leave. Story 27. There is an increase in neurodivergence among the population. There is no data to prove that because you cannot compare a diagnosis today with a diagnosis that did not exist in the past. People who are on the spectrum today were simply called weird before. Story 28. People who are overweight often snack frequently. They are constantly eating, and if they are not eating at the moment, it is because they have just eaten or are on their way to eat somewhere else. Story 29. The belief that people have diabetes because they consume excessive amounts of sugary foods is incorrect. Eating sweet foods does not cause diabetes, nor is diabetes a moral failing. If that were true, most of the global population would be diabetic, and animals would not develop. Diabetes, for example, cats are obligate carnivores and yet they can develop diabetes. Diabetes is a serious and often life-limiting medical condition, frequently influenced by genetics. Despite this, society still tends to laugh at and make fun of the illness as if it were a joke. Story 30. Autistic individuals may sometimes appear to lack empathy. In some cases, this is true, but mostly, based on what I have heard in my own experience, it is closer to this. I can tell what you are feeling and I do care, but I just do not know how to respond, so it seems like I lack empathy. Story 31. Neurotypical people think they have to speak to people with disabilities like children. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and I am almost 40. I still get treated like it from time to time. Story 32. That people who struggle with past traumas are not worth loving. Story 33. Wanting to be at home instead of out with friends is not negative. Story 34. Double D breasts are large. The number refers to the band size, and the letter indicates the cup size in relation to the band. An 8DD cup would not fit someone who wears a 16DD. Very large breasts correspond to cup sizes K, L, and M. Story 35. Art and artist are intertwined. Good people can create bad art, and bad people can create good art. Story 36. The frontal lobe develops by age 25, but that is not true. Story 37. Shaving hair does not make it grow back thicker. A moment of thought reveals how clearly untrue that is. Story 38. Many of the ideas of the American left, such as tuition-free college, universal healthcare, and subsidized daycare, are considered radical. They are, in fact, the norm everywhere except here. Story 39. Childbirth does not start with a dramatic moment where water breaks suddenly and immediate painful contractions occur. Most births start slowly, with contractions that are manageable and that you can get through while continuing with your day before becoming more intense. Water usually does not break until later. I dislike the drama they create around this in movies and on television. Story 40. Any of the misconceptions about autism. No, I am not a genius. Please do not treat me like a child. I pay my own taxes. For the love of Christ, vaccines do not cause autism, and even if they did, autism is much better than measles, hepatitis, and rabies. Story 41. Being introverted does not mean you dislike people. It means you need to recharge like a phone with poor battery life. Story 42. The term colonialism is often used in modern language to describe every country conquered outside Europe, even if they were never a colony. A colony is when a country is conquered and settled by foreign people. For example, America was a British colony because large numbers of people settled on lands conquered from the Native Americans. India was conquered by the British, but it was never a colony because the British actively discouraged settlement there. I understand that this term is commonly used to describe the era of European conquest, but it is still an incorrect use of the word. Story 43. The idea that Santos Dumont was actually the first in flight before the Wright brothers is less of a common misconception among the general public and more common in Brazil specifically, as well as among contrarians who like to think they are smarter than the general public. 1. The Wright brothers were secretive while Santos Dumont did his flights publicly. This does not matter. During the 1900s, this was significant because the claims of the Wright brothers were often met with skepticism from authorities. However, it is now 2024. Every claim the Wright brothers made is publicly available in the Library of Congress. You can see their patents, their documents, and their photographs. By 1910, this skepticism had mostly disappeared, as the Wright brothers had proved their credentials to the organizations that had questioned them. They kept their flights less public because they did not want excessive publicity and feared their ideas being stolen. Nonetheless, they had dozens of eyewitnesses that they invited. 2. The Wright brothers could take off unassisted and used a rail, not a catapult. Santos Dumont's plane used wheels instead of a rail. The Wright brothers used a rail, but not because they could not take off unassisted. Many of their flights were done without the rail. They used the rail because they felt it was advantageous, but they could take off both ways. When proving their flight to European authorities who required unassisted flight, they removed the rail and still set the record. Even today, many planes, such as Navy jets on aircraft carriers, use rails and catapults, but no one claims they are less of a plane than Santos Dumont's. 3. The Wright brothers did not just have a glorified glider, and Santos Dumont's plane was not more advanced. The Wright Flyer I was mostly a glider, but so was Santos Dumont's plane. It flew for 21 seconds and 771 feet. The Wright Flyer I flew 12 seconds and 120 feet on its first flight, but afterwards flew 59 seconds and 859 feet. More importantly, the Wright Flyer 3 flew for 39 minutes and 24.5 miles. Could also turn, which Santos Dumont's plane could not. The Wright brothers' planes were objectively more impressive. By their first public flight in 1908, European officials no longer questioned their claims. Flight length and unassisted takeoff earned the Wright brothers their medal and recognition, but their ability to turn truly impressed people. In 1909, they flew in Europe before King Alfonso XIII of Spain, King Edward VII of England, King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy, and Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm of Germany. Santos Dumont based some parts of his plane on the Wright brothers' designs. The only area where the Wright brothers did worse than Santos Dumont was publicity, due to their fear of losing their patent. The skepticism they faced was because they worked quietly. Once they demonstrated their flights publicly, it became clear they were first. Santos Dumont is an important figure in aviation history and deserves great respect. However, the Wright brothers were the first. Their inventions were more significant to the early development of the airplane than anyone else. They invented the airplane, not just a glider but an actual airplane, and later airplanes were based on theirs. I will defend the Wright brothers until the day I die. Story 44. The claim that vaccines cause autism has been disproven countless times. However, our society still feels its effects. Story 45. As a lawyer, justice on television is admirably speedy. In reality, it takes years. Story 46. The idea that you can make meaningful interpretations and conclusions about people based on how they move their body while talking, or even just how they talk, is incorrect. Human beings are far too complex for such simple notions to be effective. Story 47. Wi-Fi is wireless networking. It allows you to connect to a network that may or may not have wide area network access. There are plenty of Wi-Fi networks that are used for internal purposes only. Just because you have a strong Wi-Fi signal does not mean you have internet access or that it is working normally and fast. It means you are close to a Wi-Fi antenna, are connected to it, and have a strong signal. Story 48. I am autistic. I am not going to start licking windows. When people find out I am autistic, the entire mood changes, and I am either treated like a child or looked at as if I take the short bus. Story 49. Not all mass shooters are mentally ill. This misconception creates a harmful stigma around mental illness and distracts from addressing the real problem. Story 50. That all men are the same. I am tired of being blamed for everything negative, as it is never positive, of course. Men are lumped together for what one man did. Story 51. Too many people have no idea how nuclear weapons work. They just know that they are very destructive, which leads their minds to think they totally destroy everything without considering that one nuclear weapon clearly does not destroy the entire planet. This means there will be areas that will be destroyed and areas that will not be destroyed. Somewhere in between, there must be areas that experience some but not total destruction. This misunderstanding leads people to stand on the top of a mountain to get it over with quickly, or assume they are certain to die when a false missile warning is accidentally sent to an entire state. Duck and cover will not save you if you are at ground zero, but at some distance, a ditch or a single layer of drywall can be the difference between an avoidable, horrible, drawn-out, painful death and walking away with some ear pain. This also applies to storing several kilotons of explosive fertilizer next to fireworks and welding work. Story 52. When starships or spaceships in science fiction movies and shows are shown flying through asteroids so thick they have to dodge them, or through a nebula that is depicted as a thick cloud obscuring sensor data. Story 53. That all black people are ghetto, ratchet, only listen to rhythm and blues and rap, and are violent and racist. I am a black female who only listens to Celtic, Scottish, bluegrass, and music from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. I abhor ghetto and ratchet behavior, and small spiders scare me. It is safe to say I am anything but violent, and I love people of all races, including white people. I consider everyone I meet like family in my mind. Yet, racial misconceptions about black people continue constantly. Story 54. Abused children do not act or look a certain way. If they were easily identifiable at a glance, many abuse cases would be uncovered much sooner. The idea that abuse is related to wealth or poverty is incorrect. Story 55. That wealthy individuals possess hidden knowledge is a misconception. With the exception of insider trading, wealthy individuals are, at best, only marginally more intelligent than average. Mostly, they have been fortunate. Wealthy individuals experience a significant survivorship bias. Story 56. Not everyone with Tourette's syndrome swears. In fact, it is a rare component of Tourette's syndrome. However, it is known as the swearing disease despite the fact that it only affects a small percentage of the population with Tourette's syndrome. Story 57. The millennium started in 2001. Story 58. That personal ignorance means the things you do not know were hidden from you. Story 59. Broad terms for languages like English, Chinese, and Korean ignore the fact that each can have language families or dialects that may be mutually unintelligible or have different pronunciation and word usage. One common example is the debate about the use of soccer versus football. Also, when someone asks, "Do you speak Chinese?" it is important to ask, "Which Chinese?" People often assume countries and languages are monolithic. In India, there are over 30 official languages. Norway has 2 different languages, Norwegian and Sami. Vietnam has over 110 officially recognized dialects and languages. Our human brain tends to simplify these complexities, but in doing so, we contribute to linguistic erasure. Story 60. That people with schizophrenia are always severely disabled, often violent, and cannot live a normal life. Hello, I am here. Story 61. The way the South is portrayed on television and film is inaccurate. We have everything everyone else has. Computers, smart televisions, running water, and libraries with much more than Huck Finn and how to dig a septic tank. Story 62. In poker, you cannot call and raise at the same time. Once you say, "I'll see your bet," that is a call, and you cannot perform any other actions. If you want to raise, You must either put out the correct amount for a raise or say, I raise. 4. Clarification on the single big chip rule. If the bet is $200 and the action comes to you, and you have a $1,000 chip, but you simply throw the chip out without saying anything to indicate a raise, that is considered a flat call. This happens frequently, but throwing out a chip without announcing a raise is not a raise. The same logic applies to smaller chips. If you throw a $10 chip on a $200 bet, that is also a call. You must match the $200 amount to raise. Story 63. The idea that legal tender means a business has to accept the payment is incorrect. Legal tender only applies when there is a debt owed that has already been established, such as a fine, ticket, or loan. It does not apply to a transaction that has not happened yet, and a private business does not have to accept your $100 bill. Story 64. That people must be good if they believe in God and that they must be bad, lost, or evil if they do not. Not all of us are gullible with the inability to think for ourselves. Believing in fictional storybook characters as an adult is embarrassing. Story 65. Being against censorship and supporting free speech does not mean you have a deep desire to use racial slurs and hate speech. Some communities on Reddit may ban you for using offensive language. It is the internet. If you cannot handle it, then maybe you should not be on it. This situation is really ridiculous and annoying. Story 66. That Donald Trump cares about the people of America, was a good president, the best president ever, is honest, is mentally stable. You get the idea. Story 67. People think vegans do not eat eggs because they are baby chickens. They are not. We know they are unfertilized. We do not eat eggs because the egg industry only uses female chickens and destroys all the males. That is the sugar-coated version at least. Story 68. Not all overweight people are overweight because of eating habits. I dislike that everyone believes that all overweight individuals are only overweight due to their diet and that changing their diet will guarantee complete weight loss and an extremely thin appearance. Story 69. That people who have immigrated or do not speak the language well are stupid or criminals is incorrect. It takes courage to move somewhere, start over, and learn a new language. Story 70. The Soviet Union was the same all the time. Lieutenant Petrenko, wearing a Budanovka, arrests you and takes you to a gulag because you were listening to foreign music and told a joke about the quality of Soviet technology. Story 71. I do not think you are ready to hear the percentage of the population that has herpes simplex virus type 1. Much of society still stigmatizes it. Story 72. People often mistakenly accuse someone of having bipolar disorder due to mood swings. Bipolar disorder mood swings are not rapid. They occur in cycles, not from 1 minute of happiness to the next minute of sadness. Instead, there are weeks or months of euphoria followed by weeks or months of depression. Rapid mood swings are more characteristic of borderline personality disorder. Story 73. There are many misconceptions about eating disorders, but the most annoying is that bulimia is just purging, especially vomiting. Binge eating must be present and often. Otherwise, it is not bulimia. Story 74. That every vague quirk means you have autism. Wearing socks all the time and never wearing socks. Recognizing a family member's footsteps in another area of the house. Going over conversations in your head. Twirling your hair, tapping your pen, or fidgeting with something. Being tired after a day out in public and blaming it on masking. Story 75. That women are responsible when their husband wears unironed clothing. Tired of my husband moaning at me to iron his shirts because I can't do it right. I told him it's time he learned. Of course, despite me showing him, he didn't bother and came home from work to tell me that a female colleague asked him why his wife didn't iron his shirt for him. Story 76. Mental and physical health are not separate. My brain is part of my physical body and requires care just like any other organ. Story 77. All older adults have a baby boomer worldview. I am still a hippie girl at heart. Story 78. You do not get sick from food poisoning immediately after eating something bad. The symptoms usually appear 24 to 48 hours later. Story 79. Mother birds may reject their babies if humans touch them. Story 80. Because your friends do something, it does not mean you should do it too. Story 81. Christianity does not blame sin on a woman. The Bible very explicitly states Adam, not Eve, is responsible. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come. Romans 5 verses 12 to 14, italics mine. The Bible states that Eve was tricked by the serpent. She did not know she was sinning, and God therefore assigns her less responsibility. Adam saw through the serpent's lies and knew he was sinning. He chose to sin fully of his free will and bears full responsibility. Orthodox Christian doctrine is that Adam is responsible. Many misogynists have incorrectly utilized the story of Adam and Eve to claim a woman is to blame, but the canonical word of God states that a man is to blame. Source: I have a master's degree in Christian apologetic and am a long-term missionary. Story 82. Childbirth is what the human female was designed to do. Yes, technically humans have evolved that way, but do you know how dangerous childbirth and pregnancy-related deaths and illnesses are? Women need more support, starting with paid leave. Story 83. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is not just being neat. It is very different from that. Story 84. I have severe combined type attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It has caused me immeasurable pain, sadness, and distress throughout my life. I am a teacher, and I regularly hear other teachers saying things like, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not a disability. It is a superpower. Hearing that makes me very frustrated. Story 85. That American firearm owners are not simply seeking an opportunity to kill someone. There are significant and visible issues with gun violence in this country, but the majority of firearm owners are just as appalled by the violence as everyone else. Story 86. That Republicans are capable of doing anything good for the country. Story 87. This is a niche topic, but on Canadian subreddits you frequently hear, Canada doesn't have freedom of speech. We only have freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a broader concept that includes freedom of speech. Even Canada's Supreme Court agrees. However, this myth endures. It is similar to the false belief that undercover police officers must identify themselves if asked. Story 88. Service dogs need some form of identification. They cannot be asked to leave unless they are disruptive. Story 89. Both candidates lie. The three branches of government stand in the way on abortion issues. Donald Trump did not overturn Roe v. Wade, and Kamala Harris cannot declare Roe v. Wade the law of the land on her first day in office. As the commercial goes, that's not how any of this works. No United States president can unilaterally override or create a federal law involving funding by mere declaration. Three branches of government. 1. Legislature writes the law, votes on it, passes it to the president. 2. President signs the law. 3. Supreme Court reviews for constitutionality. Roe v. Wade was a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1973. It was not a Texas state law. On January 22, 1973, the court ruled 7-2 that unduly restrictive state regulation of abortion is unconstitutional. Abortions were legal in other states in 1973. In June 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court officially reversed Roe v. Wade. The majority, led by Justice Samuel Alito, said the 1973 Roe ruling and subsequent high court decisions reaffirming it must be overruled because they were egregiously wrong, with arguments exceptionally weak and so damaging that they amounted to an abuse of judicial authority. The problem is that Congress never wrote or passed a federal law on abortion in 1973, so there was no law for the president to sign. It is not a law in the Federal Register. The Supreme Court does not have the constitutional right to write law. The court was wrong to write law. This was an overreach of the three branches of government. Donald Trump did not overturn Roe v. Wade. As president, he did not have that power. Similarly, Kamala Harris cannot declare Roe v. Wade the law of the land when she is sworn in. This is a matter of separation of powers. She does not have unilateral constitutional authority. Giving people false hope that she can make Roe versus Wade a law by herself is a lie. She was in Congress. She could have written or co-sponsored a law mimicking the original Roe ruling, and it might have passed. However, we know the politics in Congress and restrictions make passing such laws extremely difficult. In 53 years, it still has not passed. Kamala Harris failed to get it done while in Congress, as did Joe Biden and others. Story 90. Time equals experience. You have probably dealt with people in your professional life who have been doing their jobs incorrectly for years, yet rely on their experience as a professional attribute. Story 91. The idea that poetry and classical music are boring or stuffy is a misconception often portrayed in 1980s teen movies, where characters known as jocks and badasses would say that. Story 92. That all very overweight people are stupid, lazy, and have no self-esteem. I used to weigh 500 pounds, and believe me, I am not one that supports the ideology that fat people are healthy and it's okay to be fat. It's not. It's very unhealthy. I'm proof of that. After 10 years, I now weigh 198 pounds, and I can tell you that trying to find a job at 500 pounds is almost impossible. It is one of the only acceptable forms of discrimination still around. I've had people call me after seeing my resume, extremely interested in speaking to me. They get me on the phone. I have an amazing phone customer service voice. Now they're wetting themselves, wanting to get me in today for an interview. I walk in, I get that head-to-toe backup look, and then hear, well, we're really not hiring right now. We'll keep your resume on file. It is the #1 reason that I always worked with staffing agencies when I was younger to get my experience. You had to accept me as part of the team when I was hired on as a temporary employee. Now, I've been told time and time again that they stopped seeing my weight after a couple of days because of my skill. Every permanent job I ever received started as a temporary position. I know I shouldn't, but I still resent a little bit how quickly I get a job now since I've lost the weight. I wanted to lose the weight because I wanted to be healthy. Also, my only other sibling passed away, and I didn't want to do that to my parents again. Having them lose their only other child because she couldn't keep donuts out of her mouth. I could say that I am big-boned, but I'm not. I'm an extraordinary cook, and I used to eat everything I cooked. I didn't get to that point eating pie and drinking 2-liter bottles of Coke. I make a killer hollandaise sauce. Now I cook for others, and I make my husband gain weight, who, by the way, met me before I lost the weight. And I am still asked if he is nervous that I might want to upgrade now that I'm hot. Now that I'm hot, I've always been hot. When I was single before I met my husband, I was dating 5 guys at once. Sexy is a state of mind, not looks. Looks fade, and I have a confidence that's obvious. And my husband thought I was beautiful before I lost weight. I didn't settle for anything. There's nothing to upgrade to. Plus, I did stand-up comedy for 9 years. I'm pretty funny. So yeah, this long ramble, which wasn't supposed to be, sorry, my mouth runs like a river, is all about the fact that I hate that people already have a misconception. It was like I walked into an interview with a sign around my neck that said, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, and I have no self-esteem, all of which are not true at all. Listen, I don't need to fat shame, but neither does anybody else. Everybody is fighting their own battle, and just because someone's battle shows physically on their body, there's no reason to think that they're less. I can't believe how many people have come in contact with that thought about me before even knowing my personality, before even considering that I might have a higher intelligence than the average person. I used to say that I have so much personality, it needed a bigger container. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.